So the companies that are winning it from your vantage point, implementing a software that enables remote work, what are some of the characteristics, what are some of the traits that these companies inhibit that are doing remote work well right now?
We were talking about it for the show, right? And, your experience at GitLab. I mean, I think like people had figured out before, it's really good when you're very structured processes, transparent processes. You can, measure people based on their output, and all those things apply. Good management applies, whether you're sitting in a box together or, you're working distributed. I think, one of the things that gives companies that use Kumo Space an edge is that the hardest part of our job at Kumo Space is not selling software. It's selling a new way of working, which is, hey, we're going to be remote, but we're still going to show up and be accountable for each other, right? In the same way that it's like one of the main benefits of being in a physical office is actually not being surrounded by four walls. It's actually saying, hey, from 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, we are going to be available for each other unless otherwise stated. Now, that doesn't mean that if you use Kumo Space, you can't step out and, walk the dog or go to the gym or do yoga in the middle of the day. In fact, we've got a whole status. We say that, and at Kumo Space, we're actually working in and out of the office throughout the day. But I think as a baseline to say, hey, we're working remotely, but we're still going to be accountable and transparent to each other. Like that is the biggest difference, pretending to work a startup.
Right. Because everybody, what that does is it goes back to this, everybody's on an equal footing, and it's focused on, to your point, not micromanaging, but just the transparency, the availability, so that anybody who, has questions or needs to get unblocked can understand how to do that.
I mean, well said. It's funny because sometimes people will look at Kumo Space and say, oh, is this surveillance software, or isn't this, you trying to micromanage me? And it's funny. It's like, actually, no, we're giving remote equity. We're saying, hey, you can work remotely for this company and get the FaceTime with your boss and get the mentorship from leadership. So, that it's really a matter of perspective. You can see it as, oh, this is a tool to micromanage, or you can see it as, wow, this is my opportunity to get a leg up and really be promoted and succeed in a company that truly cares about its remote employees.
Well, and I really like the positioning there of remote work equity, because that sort of denotes that you're getting some type of leverage. I think what you're contending with, and I think this is interesting based on my experience of GitLab as well, is to be able to engage with employees. If you're not physically present, it has to be known and understood, to your point, when you're available. You also want to have some level of organization and cadence around when you're engaging, whether that's with your team, whether that's with other executives, etc. Because being known, understanding how you're contributing, all of that stuff is going to be a part of your contribution to the company that's going to weigh in onto your performance review, that's going to weigh in onto your promotions, that's going to weigh in onto your ultimate impact.
100%. And I think, you talk about like structured, unstructured conversations, and we have Zoom for our structured conversations, and we can send someone a Teams message and say, hey, let's catch up. And then a couple hours later, they get back to you and they say, okay, great. When do you want to do it? And then you say, okay, maybe on tomorrow, at 5 p.m. I sent you a meeting, a calendar invite. And if you lose 24 hours 5 times a week, and then 20 times a month, and then thousands of times a year, that is really going to slow down your ability to ship. And so what we think about is Kumo Space is, hey, we're that tool for your unstructured, catch up, quick video or audio conversations. And you need both, right? You can either be super, super structured, which I think works great for teams full of engineers. But for, the rest of us, like sometimes we actually need a little unstructured time with our colleagues to fill in the blanks. And Kumo Space kind of is that tool for remote work.
Well, yeah, and I think having worked remote, and that was my, when I left the office in 2019 to take a sabbatical, and as I was building out my private equity company and making the decision to go back in and do another run at tech, I knew I didn't want to go back into an office. So I was really seeking these remote opportunities. And this is where, when you know what you're looking for and the GitLab opportunity came along, it was definitely, match made. Plus, coupled with the fact that the opportunity came, right at the height of 2020, that was really cool. But understanding this, I'd like to sort of shift this conversation from, what's making companies successful to what's making people successful, right? What's making employees successful? Because some of the things, when you go out, and I talk to a lot of technology employees weekly around career, around money, and some of the concerns, right? We know the benefit of remote work is the flexibility. The concern is that people won't see my work, I won't get recognized, I won't get the promotion that I want. What are some of the things, and again, I know there's a tool involved here, but just thinking, conceptually, what are some of the important things that people need to be doing when they are remote work to make sure that they are getting the visibility that they need?
I think one of the downsides of remote work is that you will sink to the lowest common denominator. It's very easy to just do what's asked of you, right? Like if you think about how big companies have historically used remote work, is that, any sort of back office function, right? You're saying, okay, this isn't actually that important. This is a commoditized skill, and we're going to basically make it as modular as possible. And then we're going to ship it off to the lowest possible geography. And then we're going to quality control, right? And make sure that just nothing goes wrong, right? That's the classic. And so that's kind of what's expected, I think, of most remote workers, is to be this little like work API endpoint, where you sit in your box and the work comes in and you do the work and then you send it back. And it could be basically done, through a screen, and no one would know the difference of who you are or why you exist. And I think as a remote worker, it's very easy to, and I think as a remote worker, like getting that exposure to those opportunities and those moments is absolutely critical. And that's obviously like a tool like Kumo Space makes that happen in a more organic way. When we have, it's funny when you see a meeting happen in Kumo Space that, on all hands, everyone kind of is moving across the office and assembling and having kind of little conversations in advance of the meeting. And, so we recreate that. But even if, your company wasn't using a tool like Kumo Space, I think you as a remote worker have to actually put in that extra effort to be there before and after the creation of work product and to petition your bosses. So I think it's probably making yourself known and raising your hand, and then also working at a company where they actually see the value in remote employees as not just cost centers and things to be quality controlled, but rather to basically see them as people who can do more than just their, what they were tasked with.
Right. So it sounds like company selection is critical, meaning that you want to choose a company where the remote work is still doing. You want to make sure the company understands and values what remote work is doing. And then, we talked a little bit about this before in the context of structured versus unstructured conversations. It sounds like having those unstructured conversations before and after, making sure that you're engaged in some level of networking and in side chats before and after meeting. Just understand more of the culture and feel like you're engaging even though you are remote.
Yeah, at the end of the day, all the same rules apply. They want to work with people who they care about on some sort of, personal level. And I think as a remote employee, you just got to do the extra work to get in there, and also, meet these people in person. I mean, I sell remote work software, but that doesn't mean that I don't think spending quality physical time is important. And so if I were a remote worker and I had the opportunity, like would I show up in HQ once a quarter and show my face? Like 100%.
Right. I think that's such an important takeaway, is that remote work, right? Think about the 80-20 or 90-10, meaning that you want the ability to be able to be remote and have that flexibility for a majority of the time. But there still does need to be some level of human connection, human interaction to really get the most out of this experience.
Hilarious part is that sometimes people bridle against, Kumo Spaces, I don't want to have this, I want to have this like accountability applied to me. But it's like, when people turn their mind is facing the alternative of, oh wait, I actually have to, my alternative is to show up in the office for 5 days a week. People change their tune really fast and say, oh wait, actually this is such a blessing we have to be able to work from anywhere in the world, whenever we want. I honestly, as someone else who has, more than one job, I mean, it's just amazing. If I want to work 2 jobs and work 80 and 90 hours a week, like I can.
Right, you can. And I also, the one thing I always get really curious about, especially when I didn't have a lot of experience with this, but it is concerning when people say they don't want to be accountable, because ultimately, right, we are exchanging results for a paycheck, and so there does need to be some tangible output. This is not, hey, we're paying you money to work on your ideas. There does need to be some core level of accountability. Now, not meaning like if you want to go and take breaks and if you want to be, private about what you're doing on that time, whether that's yoga, taking a nap, whatever. But ultimately, I do think that there does need to be a shared responsibility that says, hey, we're going to be accountable to make sure that the team and this business that we're opting into is moving forward. My experience was that I was working for Accenture, and I was based in Kawasaki City, Japan. We were doing this big global rollout for Dell of their instance of Salesforce.com. This was back in 2008. And I remember I had this executive meeting at 3:30. I would go down and they had this incredible pod room where they had all these little massage chairs. Like, so you're getting massaged and then you put on the earphones with classical music and you could just nap out. And that's where I really figure this whole thing out. And I'd schedule a meeting for a half hour every day. I'd go get that little nap in, and that was magic. The other thing they had is like, there was like, you could legitimately nap at your desk. If you brought like eye shields, I saw people that would literally just be napping at their desk. There's no qualms. Like, you got to nap, just get her done. I was like, wow, I can groove with that. And so we want to change the pace. We want to talk about VC investing right now in the age of AI. And then also, I'm really curious, what is it like today to be raising capital, especially in this high interest rate environment? In fact, I think I saw you do a post the other day on LinkedIn around, hey, here's some things that you can do to raise capital right now.
It's a weird market and probably confusing for entrepreneurs because on one hand, the market's been down, the interest rates are up, everyone's talking about austerity and cost cutting. And, it's honestly, the bar for raising capital has significantly, gone up. I mean, in the height of the boom, a couple guys from Uber with a few slides of a deck were raising, millions of dollars at the snap of their finger. And now, these same people are being asked for, okay, show me a few $1,000,000 in ARR before I give you your first round of capital, right? So,
right.
The bar has moved and it feels quite challenging. But then at the same time, you've got anything that's got Gen AI strapped to the name is raising millions of dollars with a couple slides and a snap of a finger. So, the way I describe the market, it's like, when you pull your frozen dinner out of the freezer and you put it in the microwave and, one bite is freezing cold and the next bite is scalding hot. I think that describes the venture market in 2024.
So do you think with now that, I think when the market becomes more conservative and people want to see, seed and pre-seed companies in a better position as an investor, running a VC fund, are you getting looks at, and let's talk about non-AI companies for a second, are you getting a look at healthier product coming your way or not?
I mean, I think there's no question that it is a great time to be an investor. I mean, I think compared to that time which was kind of irrational exuberance, now there's a big sort of technology trend, right? In the form of AI, right? And what's crazy new, business applications does that unlock, right? And maybe the biggest difference, between now and sort of the crypto boom, these are real companies. These are companies that are actually solving real problems and making real money. They're going zero to a few $1,000,000 in revenue in a few months. I mean, we have one of our portfolio companies, they went zero to a $9 million run rate in 7 months. I mean, that's an amazing business by any, it doesn't matter what technology is doing it, right? So I think it's just an amazing time to be alive and to be investing. And, how do you play, like, are these things, a lot of these companies are growing fast, but they're churning. They haven't quite found their footing, but I'm an optimist. And I also don't fully buy into this narrative that, only incumbents are going to capture value. Like that's a recurring thread. And I think there are strong arguments for it. Like, they already have the data. They already have the distribution. They're just going to drop their chat bots into any text box. And I think that will happen. But I think that's underselling what entrepreneurs are capable of and, underselling the creativity of entrepreneurs. Like, I think they're going to come up with completely new applications that weren't ever before possible. And there's going to be $1 billion businesses as a result.